The ancient Greek-Chinese war for the heavenly horses. This was about after 300 BC, the time of Alexander the Great and his descendants. Alexander the Great had brought Greek culture to the ends of Asia in the valley of Fergana, present-day Tajikistan. He had founded Alexandria Eskhati on the river Iaxarti, present-day Sir Daria, which he colonized with Greeks. The Greeks and locals there were under the Hellenistic kingdom of Bactria until about 160 BC, about when barbaric tribes conquered the surrounding area and isolated them. The Greeks in the 3rd century BC had campaigned as far as Chinese Turkmenistan and the Yunnan region. Yunnan coming from Ionan, meaning Greek. Yunnan is what the Turks call Greeks today. Now, the kingdom of the Greeks and their descendants in Fergana was known to the Chinese as Dai Yuan, which in free translation means Great Ionians, meaning Greeks. The Greeks of Alexandria Eskhati, modern-day Kuzad, maintained relations with China during the Han Empire, and according to a Chinese traveler who had gone to the kingdom around 130 BC, the country of Dajuan had Alexandria Eskhati as capital, a high civilization, and an army of 60,000 men. Now, concerning the war, the conflict between the Han China 202 BC to 9 AD and 25 AD to 220 AD and the Hellenistic kingdom, according to Chinese tradition, was caused by the refusal of the Greeks to sell to the Chinese war horses at the disposal of the Chinese emperor's army. This was considered a great insult, and Emperor Wu of China ordered his general Li Guanli to campaign against the arrogant Dai Yuan, the Greeks that is, giving him 6,000 cavalry and 20,000 infantry recruited from the remnants of the Chinese society. Kindly support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box. In 104 BC, the Chinese army began. The Chinese were forced to cross Xinjiang and the Taklamakan Desert in Mongolia. Of course, it's a desert area, estimating that they would be supplied by local guards in the oasis there. However, the latter proved reluctant, and the Chinese had to fight, burn, and loot several times. Continuing their arduous course, the Chinese reached the border of Daiyan, but by then their army had suffered terrible damage, and as if that was not enough, the Chinese were defeated by the state at the Battle of Yusheng and badly retreated. The Chinese army was completely destroyed. However, the emperor was not disappointed. In 102 BC, formed a huge army of 60,000 infantry, 30,000 cavalry, followed by 100,000 cattle and 20,000 rifles. I guess rifles, they assume, what are they? Slingshots, or, they didn't have, did they have gunpowder then? I don't know. Now, the Chinese, under General Li again, followed the same route, but this time the strength of their forces left no room for the guards. So they passed through Xinjiang and the desert without any serious problems. The huge Chinese army reached Alexandria Eskhati, which the Chinese called Ersi, and besieged it. The defenders tried to leave but were repulsed, and the siege was not pleasant for the Chinese until they managed to cut off the city's water supply. However, only after 40 days of fierce wall fighting did the Chinese manage to cause a rift in the outer wall and enter part of the city. Retreating to the inner wall, a portion of nobles demanded conditional capitulation. The Chinese, exhausted and themselves, accepted but asked for the head of the king of the city, which in Chinese text is referred to as Hugoa, which was betrayed by his noble traders. He also demanded the surrender of 3,000 war horses. Leaving without having invaded the city, the Chinese general Li Guangli enthroned one of their noble kings called Mikai in Chinese texts and left. Of their 90,000 men, however, only 11,000 returned due to damage during the siege mainly. Since their second campaign, the Chinese had no food with them. Food was given to them by the Daiyuan, the ancient Greeks that is, after the treaty, and they were not harassed by local guards except in rare cases. However, the Chinese campaign failed miserably. In 101 BC, the noble Daiyuan, the ancient Greeks that is, killed King Mikai, who was considered a puppet of the Chinese, and ascended the throne of the brother of the late King Hugua. The Chinese did not react and limited themselves to re-establishing trade and diplomatic relations with the Daiyuan kingdom, the ancient Greeks that is. The War of the Heavenly Horses ended with a strategic defeat of the Chinese. The Greco-Chinese War over the Heavenly Horses. That is, they needed horses. War horses, obviously. You know, you can imagine it when they were like tanks. Can you imagine an archer on their tank, on their horse? This is translated for you from a Greek article. I'll leave links below for you for this. Please leave your comments, and thank you for your support.